Nam Yong Professor's Commentary, Long, The National Pension, Red Lights Flashing for a 2041 Deficit and 2055 Depletion, Yet Accountability Evaporates. This national pension issue falls under Line of Business 112, Income Security in the 39 LOB framework of the three enterprise architecture. The national pension is an income security program based on cash benefits designed to baojang retirement income. Korea's population base is collapsing, yet the national pension system still runs on the assumptions of a normal country. The national pension is a function of demography, but Korea's demographics have already departed from any normal baseline. According to Statistics Korea's population projections, the share of people aged 65 and older rose from 17.4% in 2022 to 20.3% in 2025, is projected to reach 30.9% in 2036 and to exceed 40% by 2050. When the working age population shrinks and the elderly population surges, the number of beneficiaries per contributor rises sharply, producing a structural shock. The birth base has also weakened. In 2024, the number of births increased year on year to 238,300, but the absolute level remains extremely low, and the total fertility rate continues at a low level with regional disparities. If births and fertility remain low over time, the contributor base thins out and the pension's cash flow engine weakens. The prescription must not be emotional slogans, but institutional mechanisms that absorb demographic shocks. Pension reform must be elevated from a narrow technique that tweaks contribution and benefit rates into a national design that ties together retirement age, employment, childbirth, immigration, caregiving, and elderly jobs. In particular, if Korea continues to ignore the mismatch between the statutory retirement age and the pension benefit start age, contributions will be collected for fewer years while benefits will be paid earlier, accelerating the onset of deficits. Korea is ignoring a national warning, deficits from 2041 and depletion by 2055. The government's fifth national pension actuarial projection indicated that, under the current system, the pension balance turns negative in 2041 and the fund is depleted around 2055. This is not a vague statement that it may run out someday, but an explicit warning about the year when cash flows flip. The core of this warning is not whether the fund looks large or small, but the chain reaction after the balance turns negative. Once deficits begin, the fund must sell assets to pay benefits, and the greater the market shock, the worse the timing of asset sales can become. If returns become volatile, depletion can arrive even sooner. The actuarial projection also shows that changes in returns meaningfully affect the depletion timeline. The prescription is first to install automatic adjustment mechanisms that activate before the balance turns negative. Second, fiscal targets must be embedded not as a table but as binding rules. Third, instead of the National Assembly intervening each time as a political event, a phased adjustment roadmap linked to long-term projections must be built into law. The mismatch between what people pay and what they receive is eroding the system from within. The national pension survives on the balance of key parameters, namely the contribution rate and the income replacement rate. Under the 2025 pension reform, the contribution rate is to rise from 9% to 13% starting in 2026, while the income replacement rate is to be adjusted from 41.5% to 43%. The contribution rate increase is designed to be gradual, rising by 0.5 percentage points each year to reach 13% in 2033. The real issue is not whether rates rise, but how they rise and how responsibility is allocated. Higher contribution rates directly reduce the disposable income of today's working generations, while fixed benefit promises determine the burden placed on future generations. Yet politics tends to speak in pleasant generalities, pretending to spread burdens while in practice only delaying decisions. Meanwhile, demographic conditions deteriorate, and the necessary adjustment grows larger. The prescription is to specify intergenerational fairness in numbers. If contribution increases are unavoidable, the government must disclose impacts by generation and by income bracket. Benefit enhancements should be designed in a targeted manner, such as strengthening minimum protection while making implicit subsidies in high-income segments and cross-subsidies within the system transparent. Reforms that fail to show who pays how much more and who receives what level of benefits are easily overturned by the next administration. A coverage blind spot of 9.98 million people means 1 out of 3 in the mandatory participation age group is slipping out. The largest hole in the system is the people who cannot enroll or cannot pay. Reports estimate that as of the end of June 2025, the broad coverage blind spot among ages 18 to 59 reached 9.98 million people, or 33.6% of the total. The reality that the narrower blind spot, including contribution exemptions and long-term arrears, is still discussed in the millions, indicates that, despite the universal system label, the national pension carries a substantial gap. Statistics Korea's pension statistics also report that the pension participation rate for ages 18 to 59 in 2023 was 81.0%, but that figure includes occupational pensions, retirement pensions, and private pensions in addition to the national pension. This means the blind spot problem becomes even sharper if one looks strictly at the national pension, and it is likely to become structural as unstable work, career interruptions, and small self-employment expand. The prescription is not to scold blind spots as a moral failing, but to reduce them by linking the pension system to income and employment systems. Measures must be bundled, expanding contribution support for low-income regional subscribers, integrating day labourers and platform workers into workplace-based coverage, strengthening credits for career interruptions, limiting abuse of contribution exemptions, and creating incentives for re-entry. If the contributor base is not broadened, raising contribution rates will not improve overall finances as much as expected. Arrears and free riding have hardened into a structure that punishes faithful contributors. Pensions run on trust and arrears destroy trust. Reports state that at the end of 2024, long-term arrears of 13 months or more across the 4 major social insurances totaled 1.1217 trillion won, including 488.8 billion won in national pension arrears across 31,000 delinquent workplaces. This reflects a classic betrayal structure. Money is withheld from wages, yet employers fail to remit it. If this structure is left unattended, only compliant contributors lose out, and incentives to exit the system grow. The picture becomes clearer when the stakeholders are separated as distinct objects. Workers have paid their share. Employers have the legal duty to withhold and remit. Collection agencies have authority to recover and dispose. Supervisory authorities and the National Assembly have the duty to design effective sanctions. Yet the longer arrears accumulate, the more harm concentrates on workers, costs shift to future generations and compliant contributors, and responsibility blurs across employers, regulators, and politics. The prescription is to break the structure that makes arrears profitable. First, effective sanctions against delinquent employers must be strengthened, and joint liability devices against repeated asset concealment and serial closures must be tightened. Second, to protect workers' rights, benefit entitlement recognition from the time of delinquency, advance payment mechanisms, and reimbursement rights must be clarified. Third, collection must be accelerated through electronic collection, real-time reporting, and linkage with financial transactions, eliminating the expectation that if you hold out, you win. Benefits are too thin and old age poverty erupts, yet the system hides behind relative comparisons. The scorecard for retirement income security should be poverty rates and net amounts received. The OECD notes in Korea's section of Pensions at a Glance 2025 that the relative poverty rate among those aged 66 and older is around 40%, the highest in the OECD, and while it has fallen from 48% in 2011, it remains extremely high. The lived reality of the national pension also appears in numbers. As of July 2025, the overall average monthly old age pension benefit is about 679,924 won. For full old age pensioners with 20 years or more of contributions, the average is about 1,120,539 won. For those with 10 to 19 years of contributions, it is about 442,177 won, showing a wide gap. When contribution periods are short, pensions become not living income but a supplement. The prescription is first to stop leaving the national pension as a mere contribution years contest and to build institutional bridges that expand contribution periods for vulnerable groups. Second, the role division among the basic pension, retirement pensions and private pensions must be clarified, ending the fiction that the national pension alone can solve poverty. Third, long contribution periods should be encouraged, but not through coercion. They must be supported through a policy package that stabilizes employment, reduces career interruptions, and links contribution support with the creation of sustainable household cash flow. Governance accountability is dispersed even as the system manages 1,212.9 trillion won. The national pension is not merely a welfare program, but a mega-scale asset management system. As of the end of December 2024, the National Pension Fund's assets stood at 1,212.9 billion won. Performance has also been strong. The 2023 financial portfolio return was finalized at 14.14%. In 2024, figures indicate a 15.32% return, 159.7 trillion won in profits, and a cumulative annualized return of 6.82% since 1988. Yet a single year of boom performance does not guarantee long-term stability, and the larger the gap between actuarial assumed long-term returns and real market conditions, the more dangerous policy becomes. The prescription is to establish independence from politics and accountability for failure at the same time. The fund's investment objectives must not be swayed by short-term public sentiment or particular interests, while compensation, risk management and responsibility for losses must be clearly defined. Korea must also reject magical rhetoric such as one more percentage point of return will solve it, and institutionalize benefit-linked asset liability management that jointly manages returns, volatility, liquidity, and the benefit payment schedule. Pension liabilities of 6,358 billion won and unfunded liabilities of 1,820 billion won must be laid before the public. A pension is not only today's cash flow, but also the present value of future payments, meaning it has the nature of a liability. Estimates suggest that as of the end of 2024, the pension liability, including future participants, is 6,358 billion won, and the unfunded liability is 1,820 billion won, with evaluations indicating that the recent legal revisions reduced unfunded liabilities relative to the previous baseline. This is not fear-mongering, but the language of accounting that says, if you delay design, someone will receive the bill. Responsibility must be made explicit in relational terms. The National Assembly is the institution that promises benefits by law. The government operates the system and designs the framework for payment guarantees. The pension service is the operational executor for collection, payment, and administration. Subscribers and employers are parties who share costs and benefits. Future generations, not yet born, are also stakeholders who will inherit the balance sheet. If liabilities are kept invisible, politics can make sweet promises easily, operating institutions can broaden the boundary of responsibility, and costs ultimately return to the public in the form of taxes, higher contributions, benefit cuts, or inflation. The prescription is enforced transparency. Pension liabilities and unfunded liabilities must be regularly incorporated into the national long-term fiscal framework. When the system is changed, the extent to which liabilities increase or decrease must be disclosed in a single page to the public as if it were an annex to the bill. In addition, fiscal rules for short-term budgets and pension rules for long-term liabilities must be connected so that reforms do not reset to zero whenever administrations change. Ultimately, the national pension is not a problem of numbers, but of accountability design. The essence of the crisis is not whether the fund looks large or small, but that even after deficit and depletion projections are made public, no one takes responsibility. A 2041 deficit and a 2055 depletion are warnings already put on record by the state, and the aging projections are a future described in statistics careers numbers. The worst choice is to say the next government will handle it. If that delay accumulates, required contribution increases become larger, benefit adjustments become harsher, and blind spots and arrears push faithful contributors out, weakening the foundation of the system. What Korea needs is not a one-shot reform, but an accountability design in which blind spot reduction, arrears eradication, disclosure of intergenerational fairness, governance reform, and liability transparency all operate together. The national pension is ultimately a promise citizens make to one another. Promises do not survive on emotion, they survive on numbers and accountability. Thank you for watching Nam Yong Lee Professor's commentary, Long.